Welcome back to another episode with Lattice Training. Based on the popularity of the previous training plan episode, I'm going to do another one focused on route climbers. Josh has been nagging me to write his training plan for the last couple of months, so I've actually used him as the guinea pig here. He wants to climb 8A in a day on a trip to Greece this spring. So it's Friday now. I actually wrote his training plan several weeks ago to start this Monday. And unfortunately, his young girl has just died in nursery and brought back some sickness into the home. So he's been really unwell this week. And for any of you parents out there, I'm sure you can sympathise. But this is a really good example of having a plan in place, but then something comes up, whether it's illness, a work trip, or family stuff, where you can't start training in the right way that you wanted to. So I'm going to show you how to adapt a training plan based on those sort of occurrences coming up. And this is at the start of the plan, which is the best case scenario, but I'll show you how to adapt it later on in the plan as well, if things come up in future. So to get us started, what we're looking at trying to achieve is Josh climbing 8A in a day in Greece this spring. So he's got 12 weeks to prepare. He's not been doing much training leading up to this period. He has been doing climbing whilst he's at work, but generally speaking, as a new parent, he's done a lot less than he used to. He wants to be able to climb 8A in a day because, one, he struggles with skin, so he doesn't have many days in a row to climb on a trip like this. Two, he doesn't want to spend all week on one route itself, so he's spending all week trying to red point something when he's on holiday. And three, it's a great challenge to try and work his tactics and technique and physicality by trying to achieve a certain grade or a certain route in a day, which is quite hard for him. So to get started, let's look at his strengths and weaknesses. So I actually climb with Josh quite a bit, so I've got a lot of understanding about his actual climbing techniques, tactics, and physical attributes. But I still got him to do some basic tests to see where he currently stands on sort of basic metrics and to see if we can make progress in those areas over a 12-week period. So looking at his finger strength, we can see that he's done a 7-second lattice test at 138% body weight, which is quite low for his goal grade of doing 8A quickly. But because he's climbing in Greece where the holds are a lot bigger and you tend to have your thumbs involved, sort of pinches or open grips, that information is only going to take me so far. It's a great starting position to understand his ceiling of strength on that type of hold in that type of grip position, but I'm going to use that information with a pinch of salt, as all of the coaches here at Lattice do. So for me, I'm going to focus on his finger strength a little bit to make sure his strength ceiling is still high. He could still perform on smaller holds, but it's not going to be the focus of his training plan right now. The next part about his forearm testing is the repeaters 60% test. So he's done 130 seconds there, which again is an example of Josh has been climbing a lot less than normal. And this is based on a relatively low finger strength for him. So as a new parent, he's been climbing a lot less. He's been training in a structured way a lot less. And this is the type of testing that really shows that up. So he's not done as well here. But I'm pretty confident I can get that number up, and that's one of the things I'm going to focus on throughout this training plan is his ability to sustain an effort in his forearms for a longer period of time, because that's the type of climbing he'll be doing whilst he's away. The next thing we'll look at are his conditioning scores. So I've actually done some weightlifting with Josh, and I can tell a lot of his movements and weightlifting movements sort of match his basic score of, say, like a 2-rep max pull-up, which for him is 131% body weight. So it shows there's a lot of gains to be made there. Partly the reason why his conditioning scores are low at the moment is his lifestyle constraints and his equipment at home are relatively limited. So he's been doing a lot of calisthenics works, and as our flexibility coach has been focusing on that even more. So this is an area that I'm pretty confident I can make an impact on. The style of climbing in Greece as well is very physical. You're using your body a lot, you're pushing, you're pulling, you're having to do quite big moves on bigger holds. So I really want to make sure his body is feeling really strong, not only to do the moves and to perform on those efforts, but to climb something quickly in a day. You tend to want your physical ability to be slightly higher than the grade itself so that you have more quality attempts back to back. So one of the focuses for his forearm fitness and his conditioning is for me to be able to sustain his performance for maybe 5 tie-ins in a day. So a warm-up tie-in, working the route up and down, so bolt to bolt, maybe having one red point or maybe another exploratory session and then another really, really good red point, and hopefully one more if he's got that. And To be honest, that's a really good way to kind of work on this, is you're doing your warm-ups and you're trying to focus on the amount of efforts I've got in a particular day. So for any of you that are planning on a trip, think about preparing your body for the amount of tie-ins or attempts you're expecting throughout that session. If he was someone who was struggling with flexibility, I would actually work on this quite a bit for Greece because of the positions you might get in between TUFAs and knee bars. It's not essential to be able to be really flexible. I think you can get away with it, but it makes a big impact on your ability to get into certain positions. So the next thing we're going to focus on is the basic structure of the training plan. And as I mentioned before, when I wrote the plan, it was 12 weeks exactly up until his trip, which is an ideal time. It's what we usually do at Lattice. The reason being, we think that 3 mesocycles or around 3 is a great period of time to actually see significant gains in your performance and training, particularly if you've not been doing as much lately or you're changing the stimulus. It also means it's not too long, so you can focus for that amount of time. And particularly when you've got a trip at the end of it, should feel like you're training really hard, you should feel relatively fatigued, but then also have time to recover and feel really good before the trip itself to build confidence up. So within that 12 weeks, I need to consider the type of structure that I want to use, that mesocycle structure again. So is it a base training week? Is it a deload week where he's going to reduce the volume, have a bit of mental recovery? Does he need any of those? Is he going to be peaking right at the end of it, or is he going to peak sooner so that he's feeling more confident before he goes out and enjoys climbing at the wall in best form possible? The first thing I considered was doing a structure of peaking just before he leaves, and then it means I end up with a 3 on, 1 off training period, which is 3 weeks of training, 1 week of deload, 4 weeks 1 off, and then a build and performance week just before he leaves. The reason why that can work and is a really good method of doing it is you're building in some really good training blocks where you can build up fatigue, build up the training volume, and then you've still provided time to recover and taper just before going away. And it's something I've used quite a lot. Now, you don't need, as I said before, to have deloads in your training plan if the week structure is perfect for you and you have time to recover. The reason we still do this is because it provides a mental break, it provides a clear change of stimulus. So usually we change the stimulus all the sessions from one mesocycle to the next, which provides more interest and can provide another kick for the body to adapt to. And it means that you kind of have a smaller period of time. You're chunking out your training plan, so you're focusing on the next mesocycle rather than feeling overwhelmed by 12 weeks or 6 months or 1 year. So that was my first thought in terms of a basic structure. But based on Josh's fatigue levels as a new dad and sort of talking to him about his training coming up and the potential chance of things like this sickness coming up again, I've actually switched to a slightly easier pattern of training. So this time I've done 3 on, 1 off, so 3 weeks on, 1 week deload, repeat that again, then 2 on, 1 off, and then 1 performance taper week. For me, that means that he's training for a reduced time each mesocycle, so he's not got that 4 weeks in the middle. It means we've got a really short period of time at the end, which will provide more opportunity for recovery and reducing that fatigue. And it means he's still going to be peaking at the right time. For most athletes, you're better off leaving well recovered than you are training a little bit more, hoping to make some smaller gains and then going away slightly fatigued. Josh has sent me his calendar and his weekly structure that I've got to work with, which is relatively static these days based on work and childcare. He has 2 to 3 climbing sessions a week, with one of those being limited by looking after his young daughter whilst at the wall climbing with friends. Then he's actually doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 3 times a week. I know, complete distraction, isn't it? But it's something he really enjoys, so we have to work around it. That means that he's also got some time for S&C and fingerboarding twice a week. So climbing 2 to 3 times a week, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 3 times a week, and then S&C or fingerboarding twice a week. So an interesting point is doing BJJ or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu more than his actual climbing training right now. This is actually something I deal with quite a lot as a coach, is conflicting priorities in training. We need to think about how we can use these other activities to benefit us and also take them into account in the training plan. It's something he obviously really enjoys, so we need to keep it in there. But it's a great sport for his full body conditioning and his flexibility. So in terms of TUFA wrestling in Greece, it's only going to be beneficial. And like I said before, he's already a flexible climber. and this sport actually really helps maintain his flexibility and strength in range. So I'm actually going to consider those sessions in the training plan. Rather than adding loads of extra conditioning in or loads of extra flexibility, I know that it's already taken care of in this other activity, which is brilliant. I mean, a lot of people use climbing as cross-training for other sports because of the physical nature of it. So in this case, we're using BJJ as the cross-training sport. So the one compromise that I have been able to make with Josh is that leading up to this trip, focusing on this goal, I've asked him to drop one of those BJJ sessions in the week so that I can focus a little bit more on his climbing goal. And that's something he's been happy to do, so I've built it into the plan. So when you're thinking about prioritizing your goals and other activities, just think about the amount of time that you can spend on each and at certain points in the year. So if you have got a goal coming up, it's okay to drop those other areas like you have done in climbing at certain times and maintain. Now it's time to look at the workouts themselves. So the first workout I'm going to add in is route climbing at the end of his training plan. So I know this is something logistically that Josh struggles to do, is finding a partner and a regular space to go climbing in the week. Particularly on routes. But I know this is really important for your performance when you go on route climbing trips. Josh doesn't necessarily struggle with the fear of falling, but he hasn't been on a rope much since he's become a parent. So I want to make sure that we don't have him going away feeling really fit and then unable to relax whilst he's climbing. So in that last mesocycle, when he's reduced his BJJ sessions, I've asked him to increase the climbing by once a week, replacing that time, and try and find a partner that he can book in now to go and do some route climbing practice with. Just a route pyramid session is going from easy to hard and back down. So there's a lot of volume in there, but also make sure that he has some full practice in there. So that means he'll probably get falls on the harder climbs, but also just jump off the top of some of the easy climbs. That's not necessarily the best way to do full practice, but I know that it works for Josh and he's comfortable enough to do that. So in this last mesocycle, from the last deload week, I'm going to add in one route climbing session a week into that period of time. The next workout I'm going to look at is the Thursday workout. The reason why I'm focusing on this now is it's his most consistent workout in the week. And this is because it's at the lockup here at our office where we have a couple of boards and a circuit board. The reason it's most consistent is he's working here in the office on Thursdays. He can go straight on the board afterwards. There's a group of people that train here on Thursdays, and he really, really enjoys that session. Josh is someone who really responds to social climbing, and it's one of the most important things for him to keep in his plan throughout all this period. So what I'm going to add in first is a boulder pyramid session, and that's going to be through the first two mesocycles. So he's going to start off relatively easy and then go up to something that's like a project level and back down. So in this case, it's going to be from around V4 to V9 on the board, which I know works for Josh, and that's what I've written down in his coach's notes. Now, you might be thinking climbing on the lookup board, which is really small holds, is not going to prepare you that well for grease on big twofers and big movements. However, again, in training, you've got to think about what's the most important things. Motivation and consistency are far more important than the specific content of his training plan right now, particularly in these early phases. In the last mesocycle, I'm going to add board climbing sending session. So this is actually something relatively similar, but it's more focused on doing a greater volume at a slightly lower intensity. So in this case, I'm going to just put that in the last two mesocycles, the building bit and the performance phase. Again, he will be on the board. I've said he's going to do around 10 problems that start relatively easy and then go up to about 90% of his max. So I'd probably say up to about V7, and he shouldn't be falling, so he should have a high success rate. The reason being, it means he's going to be making sure that any sort of crux he comes up against, on most 8A routes, you're looking at maybe V6. So he will be able to complete those crux movements, and he's keeping his strength base high. But more importantly, he maintains the consistency of that Thursday session, which is social, and it's going to push him quite hard with other climbers here at the office. During the first two deload weeks, I'm actually going to just add in a free-form board climbing session. So that's without structure. Again, providing consistency of that Thursday session, I'm going to ask him to take it slightly easier in that session and just make sure that he's actually accomplishing the routes and he's not projecting like most people try and do on deload. But it means, again, there's no reason he needs to drop the volume too much. He's not doing too much in the base phase, that he needs that deload completely, but it's reducing the intensity a little bit, but maintaining the consistency and frequency. So he's got a board session in those first 2 deload weeks. So if I was to finish there with just bouldering, I'm clearly not going to be focusing on the priority of Josh's plan, which is building fitness and power endurance in particular. So we've got a bouldering section which covers the social elements and the harder part of the climbing workout. Now I want to add in some endurance. Now what I'm going to do is add in interval style training because I know Josh really enjoys this. So I'm going to focus on a one-on-one off session. So in the first mesocycle, I'm going to use 8 sets of 1 minute of climbing on moderate terrain. So for Josh, this would probably be around 6C to 7A, and then it has 1 minute of rest. That means that he's going to sort of build that time on the wall and then recovery off the wall. And it's going to last 16 minutes for the 8 sets and then go up to 20 minutes on the 10 sets. So 1 minute on, 1 minute off. In the second mesocycle, I'll continue that same session, but then I'm going to progress it to something slightly different, which is far more applicable to Josh and his goal of climbing in Greece, and that is one-on-one off active. So that means you're going to climb on the wall for a minute around the same sort of circuit, 6C to 7A. It doesn't need to change at this point, but then he's going to find a jug or a resting position to rest on the wall in that minute off. So in this case, he'll be doing 6C and then he'll find a jug, rest on that for a minute and then carry on that 6C. Now that is a big step up in terms of intensity. So again, I'll reduce the amount of volume he's doing for that to probably around the same as before. So we're going for 8 sets, that's 16 minutes on the wall. He should know the circuit quite well by now if he's using the same one, so it does reduce the intensity a little bit. In this instance, I actually want Josh to be using knee pads as well and try and use knee bars as much as possible. See if we can find a good resting position. You do stand out if you're wearing knee pads at a wall, but it's a great way of building like the tactics and technique of actually recovering well on those sort of positions when you're climbing away. And in Greece, this plays a massive role. And then in the last phase and in those last performance week, we're going to do the same protocol for that as well. So it's increasing the intensity again and increases the specific stimulus that he needs to recover on the wall. You'll notice that I've dropped it down in the last performance week, and that's just to reduce the intensity very slightly, or the volume, sorry, so that he's going away a little bit fresher. In the last week, he should be building fitness here. So what I'd like to do is just add in a few harder elements to it, to that power endurance in the middle. So what I'm going to add in is a session called Harder 5 Sets. And that's effectively looking at doing a circuit, a known circuit, which is going to test his power endurance. In this instance, I want Josh to be on around 8A. So he's going to do board sending, which is a slightly lower volume and easier board climbing. Again, that social element, something he really enjoys. Then he'll still have energy to try this harder 5 sets. And this is just in this last mesocycle. And then he's going to go on to that endurance element at the end where he's going to be feeling relatively fatigued. In the last rest week as well, I'm actually going to go for just the harder 5 sets and not do any bouldering or the endurance. So he's going to have an opportunity when he's fresh to try some of those harder climbs that he's been practicing. So in the build and last performance week, he'll be only trying the circuit 3 times, and in that deload week, he'll try it 5 times, but without the bouldering and endurance before and after. So there we have the first workout completed. That's the Thursday session, which is most consistent. It's something we need to keep in mind with that social element of climbing, and it shows a lot of progression throughout the plan. Now, as you can see on this chart at the bottom, which shows his training load and then the training time, just that one session alone changes it massively in that last phase. Even when we take out route climbing from the plan, there's still a significant increase in that last phase, both in terms of time and in terms of training load. It's really good at this first stage when you look at the most consistent session in the week to see how much progression there actually is taking place. Because one thing you'll notice is if you try and add progression in every single workout, you're going to overload your body too quickly. We know that there's progression happening throughout the plan anyway now, so it means that other sessions can stay more consistent throughout the plan and just change the stimulus slightly, because we know we're overloading the body in this one session alone within the week. So think about the entire week, not just every individual workout when we talk about progressive overload. Now let's have a look at the following workouts. So we've got Monday and a new one on Wednesday to play with in the rest of the mesocycles. So the Monday session, Josh has his young daughter to look after. So the priority is going to be having something that's manageable in that circumstance. So being able to go bouldering is a great way of doing that. But we know that doing too much hard bouldering is not needed. So I'm going to add in a boulder mileage session. In an ideal scenario, this would be with a lower grade with reduced rest. However, I'm going to set sort of the minimum parameters here. So he's going to do a moderate boulder mileage session, which for him will be somewhere between V3 and trying sort of V6, V7 at the wall. And the idea is just to try and get at least 20 problems done. That means that he can go to the wall. The realistic chance that he can get that done in an hour, if that's all he has, is quite high. So he could be going on and off the wall with a friend looking after his child with him. Or if he manages to stay there much longer, he can obviously increase the volume completed or just have longer rest between the attempts and try something a little harder. But it provides a really good place for him to build some more mileage into his week. I'm going to just do that all the way across the plan. Again, consistency is key. He can reduce the load in those deload weeks slightly, and I'm going to take that out in the performance week where he needs to be fully recovered before going away. So really simple session, boulder mileage on Mondays. The next workout I'm going to add in is the Wednesday session. Now this is new for Josh. He doesn't usually have this schedule in his week, but like I said, his daughter's just started nursery, so he's got this new slot on Wednesday morning. I'm going to start by adding in some harder bouldering, because I know this one will be at the commercial wall. The style of climbing at the climbing depot, which is Josh's local, or the hangar, would be really good for Greece in terms of big movements, bigger holds, slopers, pinches and so on. So I'm going to add in a short session for that. So he's going to warm up, then he's going to do half an hour of trying hard climbs. Again, I know he's going to enjoy that. The movements are more applicable. Yes, he doesn't need to focus just on strength, but this is just the start of the session, so he's going to feel fully recruited. But he's not going to be exhausted by the end of this part of the workout. The next part of the workout, I'm going to try and do something that is really easy for him to manage. Again, we're going to use that climbing style that is really good for Greece, which is sort of bigger movements, bigger holds, rather than using the circuit board necessarily. So we're going to use a 4x4 or 4 or more session. So 4 or more is effectively just a longer 4x4 session, so it's 6 sets instead. The reason I'm doing that rather than spending more time on the wall is, again, I want him to build up the capacity to do bigger moves when he's feeling tired, which is usually what you find in Greece, where you get resting positions, then you need to still plow on with big physical moves. This is something Josh really struggles with, and I've seen him struggle with this personally when we've gone climbing together, so I really want to make sure he feels good in this way. And he'll really translate from all of that conditioning work he's done in his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to on the wall kind of wrestling when he's feeling tired, getting the bigger muscle groups to work when the forearms are tired. So that builds up throughout the entire training plan. And it's combined after that harder bit of session, so he's going to be fully recruited, then go into that power endurance element. However, it would be remiss of me to do no endurance training at all. So what I'm going to try and do is in this session, as part of his warm-up or part of his cool-down, he's going to do some arc training as well. So I'm going to add in some arc 10, which is just 10 minutes on the wall, really easy, or arc 15 towards the end of each mesocycle. And again, that's building that base endurance up. Now, what you'll probably notice is that I tend to wave arcing. So I'll do 10 minutes on the first week, 15 minutes, so progressing it on the second week. But on the third week, when your skin's starting to feel sore and you're starting to feel tired, I'll drop that arcing back down to 10. You don't have to do this, but for me, with someone who's we need to keep consistency with, it's a really good strategy to kind of wave your endurance training throughout a mesocycle as your body's starting to feel more tired. You can push it harder and reduce the intensity elsewhere. That is another method. But for Josh, who struggles with skin, this is a great option to use. So now that I'm checking the scale at the bottom, so looking at the graphs, I can still see the fact that I have progressed the load throughout each mesocycle. There's no massive jumps up. Probably in the last week 9 is when we see the biggest jump. But because it's a 2-week mesocycle, it means we should get away with it, where we're pushing his body quite a bit harder and then we're reducing it slightly into that last performance phase, so he's going to feel fully recovered. The last thing I'm going to add in is some carking. So I've put it down as arcing here. Carking, if you haven't seen it, is using off-the-wall endurance training with a grip device or something where you can squeeze and get some blood flow to the forearms. Check out the other video of Josh using this. It's a really good watch, and we know that it works for Josh. So I'm going to put this in as an optional extra. I'm going to put that in 3 times a week in the first couple of phases and then reduce that as he's focusing more on power endurance. And it's just going to help him increase his baseline endurance even more. Because I've combined these sessions, I'm going to add in some arcing to the deload weeks, just to make sure that he is doing some sort of endurance training in those deload weeks. So now one of the things that is really important to do is we've planned in the main part of Josh's training, which is the climbing. So I actually wanted to see how this fits into his week and whether it matches his calendar. So we know he has BJJ on Mondays, Wednesdays and Saturdays, so we've put that into the plan first because that's things we're not going to move around. We know that he has Thursday is his main session in the week where he's going to be doing social climbing, so boulder pyramids and one-on, one-off. Once we've added in the Thursday, which we know is really important, we're going to look at the other sessions. So boulder mileage on the Monday, which is with his daughter, and then we're looking at the mixed session on the Wednesday morning as well. So a little bit of bouldering, just working on bigger moves, then doing some power endurance, learning to perform on bigger moves for a sustained period of time, then looking at some arcing in there, so the base endurance work. Then we have this carking session. So we've got it down as arc 10, so it's 10 minutes of carking, which is using a grip device, and he can do that any time of the week. Now, I would recommend he does that as on his rest days, and he can combine this with some of the finger strength work that he might do, or he could combine it just with any of the conditioning really, so whenever it's most convenient. So fingerboarding wise, we know that strength is not something he needs to massively develop, but it is something we want to consider. So with Josh, I want to consider the consistency and the ease of use of the training sessions we're going to give him. So I'm not going to focus too much on massive amounts of load because he doesn't have many weights at home. He has a basic fingerboard and pinch setup, and he's going to be doing some at the wall, but he's got limited time at the wall and he's already doing quite a bit of bouldering, so we don't need to push finger strength much outside of those sessions at home. So what my preference is going to be is to focus on doing density hangs for one of the sessions in the week. I find this a really, really useful session for anyone that's trying to make sure they maintain finger health, maintain recruitment whilst they're focusing on more on climbing, and just in terms of keeping good, healthy fingers in different grip positions. So I'm going to focus on half crimp position for the majority of the workout, but combine it with some open 3 hangs. That's because Josh is not the best in a drag position, so it's a really good way of training that. By doing density, I'm going to prescribe this as body weight only. So he's only going to be hanging with his body weight, no additional weight. He can actually do some of it with his feet on the floor as well, which I'll include in the notes, to build up. So it means a reduced amount of warm-up. He can probably do this at home pretty easily, and he can do this during sort of his child's nap time. I am going to progress the load slightly in this session, but not by much. So what I'm going to suggest to Josh is that he uses up to body weight in progression A, which is in the first mesocycle and week 1 of the second mesocycle. And then in progression B, for each of those sessions, he could add a very small amount of weight or just do all of the sets at body weight instead of keeping his feet on the floor for some of the warm-up sets. So again, we're already seeing progression in the plan. There's no need to try and progress every single session. This is a recruitment and finger health. You don't need to keep pushing every single session. So the second session in the week, what I'm going to get Josh to do is do some very easy recruitment lifts, which he can do at home using a lifting edge. This is something where I want him to just be getting frequency of training in the week and working his forearms, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're loading them too much. So we're going to do a half crimp loading process in terms of his fingers in a lift position, so lifting off the ground. But then I'm going to follow this as that'll be part of the warm-up with some loaded pinch training. So we know in Greece that you end up using a lot of pinches, and that's something that Josh really struggles with. So I'm going to make sure that he is loading some of the pinch training, and he's going to progress that throughout the week. So if he needs to plan in the structure of the week, this session is the one that he has to have a bit more focus and energy for. In the pinch workout, I'm actually going to prescribe that he uses the Lattice quad block, and he's going to go for the wide deep position. So the wide shallow is sort of the smaller bit, so you've only got one pad on each side of your hands. And the narrow is just using one of the slots, but the wide deep is what you tend to feel when you use bigger TUFers, and it means you can't half crimp as much. And that's something that Josh really struggles with, so it's a really good tool for that. So that's the session he's going to progress after doing warm-up lifts as well.
Are you trying to build finger strength or just warm up for a session properly? If you are, we've got training tools designed specifically for that. Whether you're training at home, warming up at the crag, or trying to squeeze in a session on the go, our training tools are designed to activate key muscles, protect your fingers, and build serious strength over time. And right now, there's 15% off all of our portable finger strength training tools and warm-up equipment. That includes the MX Lift, that includes the quad block, and you can also get the resistance bands, which help you combine this for an excellent warm-up setup. For the 15% discount, follow the link in the description below and use the code WARMUP15 at the checkout. Back to the video.
So the last thing I'm going to focus on is conditioning, and as I said at the very start, he's doing loads of conditioning and physical activity outside of climbing in his BJJ sessions. Now, I'm not too bothered about him doing any sort of compression work at all, because he's doing that a lot in his movements outside of climbing. If he wasn't doing that, I'd spend a lot of time looking at working his chest, working at those compression muscles, which are really important for that Greek style climbing. So what I'm going to focus on for Josh is working on opening up his body and opening up his mid and upper back to make sure that his shoulders are feeling protected. It's balancing out the climbing that he's doing, so those external rotators, and he's doing some basic pulling work, which he can do at home as well. So to begin with, let's have a look at doing some basic pull-ups. I'm going to start with strength capacity pull-ups because it means he can do it at home with just body weight. It means he can progress his ability to sustain a pulling effort and build his capacity for sort of pulling movements. Then I'm going to build it into strength work right at the end, so he'll use some weights, added weights, just so he feels fully recruited before going away, and he's got that base pulling fitness. The next thing I'm going to focus on is a TRX ANCAP pull. This is a different session that he can do at home, or he can do this at the wall with a TRX setup. And it's pretty much like a hanging row. So you're doing feet on the ground and then you're pulling into the mid-back. Again, this is really good for steep terrain. And I've done it this ANCAP pull session because I want him to build resistance and ability to keep pulling when he's on steep stuff. It kind of matches the stuff that he's doing in his BJJ sessions, which is an anaerobic effort, but in that really good pulling motion. It's also with good form going to make sure that he opens out his chest and works the mid-back, which helps your posture. I won't take that into the final week though, because it is quite fatiguing and he's going to be doing power endurance in that time. So the TRX session is only going to be in the first 2 mesocycles. The next workout is going to be an IYT reverse fly. This is going to work his rotator cuff, it's going to work his shoulders. Again, really good for those postural muscles and will balance out that kind of curled in position in BJJ where you're squeezing and compressing, and all of those internal rotators being used in climbing. So you'll notice in those last 2 exercises, I've not progressed them at all. Like I said at the very beginning, you could progress every single workout, you can progress every single exercise if you wanted to, but you're going to overload the body too much. I'd rather have some progression in the plan and make sure he's consistently ticking these sessions off, if not. So the IYT and the TRX, I'm going to keep pretty static because he'll know the workouts. They should feel easier with time, but he's going to feel more and more recruited in those movement patterns himself. Because Josh will spend a lot of time sort of grappling in this sort of position and then climbing in pulling positions, I want to make sure he's doing some movement overhead as well. Just find that produces a lot more health around the shoulders for me personally and with the clients I work with. So we're going to start off with a strength capacity session and build that into some strength work just to reduce the volume a little bit and increase the intensity. Now we've already said Josh is doing a lot of flexibility in his BJJ sessions, so I want to make sure that we're not missing anything out on his lower body, because so far everything in terms of conditioning has been very upper body based. I don't want to add too much in there. He's going to work a lot in terms of his glutes and working around his trunk as well in terms of movements. But I do want to make sure that we're doing some kind of stability work as well, particularly around his knees. So I'm going to add in goblet squat. This is a really easy exercise for anyone to add into their training plan. You can do it with dumbbells, you can do it with kettlebells, but effectively it will work your quadriceps and work your glutes as well, but just in a really simple movement pattern. It's much easier to do than using a barbell. And for me, this is something when you're pulling a lot with your legs and your hamstrings, it's a really good exercise, which is going to help you sort of knee health by making sure you're in balance. So reviewing the graph again, we can see that we've got a relative progression. It doesn't go up too much at the beginning of each phase. We do have deload weeks in there, which are a lot lower, which means it's going to take the pressure off him mentally in terms of I've just got to get through this mesocycle. It fits in with the weekly schedule and it's going to work all the areas of the body we need to focus on. So let's go back to the week schedule and make sure that it all fits in. So it does look like it fits in really well. He has a Monday climbing session, which he's doing with his daughter, so it's relatively relaxed, followed by the other activity in the evening. Then on Tuesday, he's got some carking, so you can do that as part of the warm-up, then some density hangs that I'll be using, simple fingerboard set up at home, really easy for him to fit in. Wednesday, he's got a bit of bouldering, followed by power endurance, followed by endurance. Again, it's a whole spectrum session with the priority on the power endurance and endurance at the end. The bouldering is just the fun bit, working some bigger moves and getting used to problems. Then he's got BJJ in the evening as well, so that's quite a big day for him. Thursday, he's got boulder pyramid in the evening, so he's got at least 24 hours of rest after his BJJ and 36 hours after his climbing session previously. That'll be on the board here, so you're having a social session and then doing endurance afterwards. They'll progress to doing circuits later on in the plan. Friday is some carking with some conditioning at home. Then he gets pretty much the weekend off climbing with a little bit of fingerboarding on Saturday and some BJJ again and carking. Later on in the plan, we'll need to exchange the weekend session for route climbing or move the sessions around. So say on Wednesday, he might do that on the weekend and then go route climbing on Wednesday evening instead, just to make sure he's not doing all the climbing on one day. But it works really well and it fits in with his plan. So there you have the basic plan for Josh to climb 8A in a day. However, at the very start, I said that we're on week 1. I'm recording this having him already started this week. I've literally got a message on my screen saying I've done bugger all training this week because I've been too ill. So how do I adapt a plan like this? The main thing we need to look at, and we use these graphs, they're very simple on our system to give us an idea. This is not absolute detail here, but it does give us an idea on time and on workload. The main thing is not having a huge jump from deload weeks or between different weeks within the mesocycle. So you'll see a step up, but they're actually relatively okay. So what I need to do is go, okay, I need to reduce the amount of load he's doing in this current week. So I'm going to edit this now. So he's not had time to do anything this week. So I've deleted this week completely in terms of what's on the plan, but we're still in this 12-week phase for him to build up. Now, I could change the mesocycles a little bit, so he does 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 1 week on, 2 weeks off, but right now it's almost better just to adapt this section of the plan as well. So firstly, what I need to do is decide whether there's any progressions that we're planning next week which can't happen anymore. Luckily, there's not actually anything that I'm progressing in the first 2 weeks, which is very normal in a training plan. So I don't need to change anything there, but based on the fact that he's been ill, I could reduce the load slightly. So what I'm going to add in is 2 carking sessions at the end of this week for the weekend, which will make him feel like his forearms have been worked a bit. So it's going to be a bit less of a shock next week. I'm also going to add in the fingerboarding session for this weekend. He has actually messaged me saying he feels okay today. So I want to make sure that he's again doing something this weekend just to get his fingers and forearms used to it for next week. But I'm not going to add anything more than that. Next week, what I need to consider is, can I reduce the intensity at all? So rather than reducing the frequency, what I'm going to suggest he does is on the boulder mileage session on Monday, I want him to make sure he has a very, very easy session on that. So I'm going to switch that one out. So instead of doing a harder boulder mileage session where he might do quite a bit of volume at a moderate intensity, I'm going to switch it for an aerobic, easy mileage session. So the Monday should feel relatively nice and it'll build up. The rest of the week I think will actually be okay based on everything we've got down here. Just to make sure that we'll stay in touch, but just to make sure that he's getting back into the training cycle. As I said, weeks 1 and 2 were actually the same, so it's like him going from week 0 to week 1 anyway, just with a little bit more fatigue, and that's why we've adapted the Monday and this weekend. If we were to see this happen in midway through the plan, I would be adapting the plan significantly for that. Let's use an example of on March the 17th, so this building week, Say we have lost Josh is ill on that week and we need to reduce the amount he's doing. So that would take out everything from this week as an example. What would we do? We wouldn't go straight into a build week the next week. So what I would do if that was the occasion, I would switch that following week where he's been sick to another deload week. Then I would make the next 2 weeks build weeks and into performance. So I'd make this first build week, March 24th, into something a bit of a ramp up, harder on March 31st, and then have the performance week as a taper as well, like we've got in already, just to make sure that he's feeling totally fresh. So that's how you would adapt to. You always focus on how much is the load changing quickly. We can't just jump back into where we left off. So it's all about making sure the ramps on and off training are nice and smooth. If it's really vertical and you're going from nothing to everything, that's when we start seeing problems happen, or when the load stays too high for too long. So one of the questions I get asked a lot as well is, should I try and fit some of the training I missed last week into this week? That should never be the case, or never the mindset to have. What you need to be thinking is, what does my body need right now? Don't overestimate what you can do in a week and underestimate what you can do in a cycle or a year. So focus on the long-term scale of this. If you've missed a week, you need to change the ramp up the following week as well. Don't try and catch up too much and make it a big jump from being ill or taking time off to try and catch up and do all the training that you've missed out on. A couple of sessions missed in training will not impact your performance or impact your gains, but getting injured or demotivated will. So focus on the up ramps and the down ramps more than just getting all the training in. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I really enjoy doing this. It's been my day-to-day job for over a decade now. I really enjoy sharing this information. So if you'd like to see more, or you have any particular questions, comment below and I'll see you soon.